I'm going to do a pan. See, a lot of people wouldn't see this place when it's nice and dark, just to kind of give them behind the scenes little look. But I'm here with the beautiful. I'll call you Maria, but of course, professionally, people would know you as Mia, and certainly with your wonderful album, Little Trip to Heaven. That's the name you're using.
Yep.
We should jump right back. I'm thinking of when you were growing up, and I know that you've said yourself, the night in the Whale is sort of inspired by the old Hollywood musicals and Sinatra and Doris Day and all that.
Yeah.
Well, can you remember that sort of childhood moment when you knew, oh, do you know what? I think I'd like to do this as a for my life.
Probably. It was probably like, I know it sounds pretty stereotypical, but little girls watching movies with their grandfather. That was me. My grandfather was a singer. My mum was a singer. But I do remember watching Breakfast at Tiffany's and thinking, oh, she's lovely.
Yeah.
So,
I felt the same way.
So yeah, but yeah, it was probably, I always say, like rainy Sunday afternoons with my grandfather. He was fantastic. He had great knowledge, and he had the most beautiful bass baritone voice. So singing all those old songs in his rich velvety voice really made me fall in love with that side. But then again, I grew up to study musical theatre, which is probably has been my passion, you know, for a very, very long time. And this cool jazz is just, it's another part of me.
Yeah, it's another muscle. It's another kind of colour.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Well, the great thing about musical theatre is that it's gone in the last 10 years from being a relatively kind of, I wouldn't say minority, but it was a little bit old school and a little bit sort of, you had to be particularly, you know, kind of into that world to know it. But then people like Hugh Jackman, and then even Glee, and there's so many kind of, you know, examples of the musical, and Disney's kind of return with you know, big musicals like Frozen and Enchanted, and and it's very mainstream because you know, The Voice and all those guys are really about the
and
musical.
There's loads of modern musical theatre. Like it's not, it's no longer like Gilbert and Sullivan, and it's modern themes. It's dealing with modern issues, which is great. And the songs are, you know, there are a lot of musicals that are very pop based, rock based.
Sure.
There's all sorts, and all sorts means it appeals to a broad spectrum of people. But for me, I love musical theatre because I suppose when you're performing musical theatre, you're telling a story always. Right. And it's a bit like my show on the 15th. It's the songs all have stories. So they're obviously the older kind of crooner songs. Yeah. Usually it's about heartache and people cheating on each other and broken hearts, and there are some really nice positive ones. Yeah. But it's an era, it's a time, and it's very much glamorous and. Yeah, and a lot of stories, good stories, and funny stories. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll Never Fall in Love Again, the Burt Bacharach song. Right. So written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Yep. But that song, actually, the lyrics were written by Hal David because they had to write this song for a movie. And at the time, Burt Bacharach was hospitalised with pneumonia. Oy. And he couldn't sit at the piano to play. So while he was in hospital, Hal David wrote the lyrics to the song, and it was like, what do you get when you fall in love? Do you know? And it's all you get. What do you get when you kiss a guy? You get enough germs to catch pneumonia. So it's like, so he kind of wrote it about his friend. Sure. So all that kind of stuff. So it's cool. There's some really nice little stories. Well, of course, all of these songs.
The great songs tend to be, as you mentioned, that they're really born out of, you know, pain and you know, kind of a heartbreak is an incredible. Some of the greatest albums, from Blood on the Tracks to, you know, there's so many people who just in that moment captured, you know, this is my heartbreaking, and that's often much more inspiring and much more of a muse than I had a lovely day today, and you know, I found a fiver.
But we know that in everyday life. It's like people just go for the sort of drama, don't they?
We should ask too. I know that, you know, there you are, you're a young girl, and you realise your grandfather got this lovely voice. It's in the family. I mean, it is one thing for your family to say, "Oh, you sound lovely," but then it's kind of the step out into the big bad world of strangers. And was there a point there where you took that step and realised? Because
I probably was performing from quite a young age,
right?
And I really do love to perform. What, you know, I suppose standing out on stage, like no matter how much you perform, like no matter how many shows that you do over the years, how many appearances you make, you'll always be nervous before you go on stage. But it's really nice. I think when any performer goes on stage, like for me, I'm obviously Maria Fitzgerald, and on my jazz album I go by Mia, but it's kind of like a little character. Right. So it's nice to be able to step forward kind of as yourself, but a little bit as the performer. Sure. But a time in my life that No, I can't actually remember when it was that I decided that I wanted to do this. I know, like, I studied in London.
The Royal Academy.
The Royal Academy of Music in London, and that was a pretty big step.
Right.
Because that's tough training.
And it's a real labour of love, because it's only a small kind of percentage of people who dedicate their life to the arts can make a good living from it, because it is really about, you know, loving it first, and then if you're lucky, you just find a way through, you know, through
but
either.
You've got to, I think as a performer, you've got to be, you know, pretty savvy in being able to. For me, I definitely do lots of. I'm quite versatile, so I do lots of different performances. I do my jazz. I also run an events company, musically, and I do a lot of concert work. And I love every single little facet of what I do, which is great, because, you know, you would hope a lot of people love what they do.
We should mention that the album was it's on your own Mia Bell Records. It made album of the week and Lyric FM. You got to touch the hem of Marty Whelan, which is a big moment in his life.
Great. But we love Marty.
You got a great album. I know that it's young Mr. Ray is in there as the musical arranger. You've got Bob Katz in Florida as the engineer.
Yeah.
And you've got a bunch of great musicians in there. Was that a tough gig to pull off, or was it just
no, it was you know, I took my time to do it. It was so enjoyable. My musicians are from, you know, they're obviously I think the best in the country, but they are. So you've got the likes of, say, David Ray's my musical arranger. We've got Joe Chibi on double bass on the album, Nicky Bailey on drums. He's known for extreme rhythm. Dražen Derek, fabulous Croatian guitarist. So he's a jazz guitarist, but he's also a songwriter, and he wrote one song which is on the album, and another two which will appear in the show.
Great.
And then we've got the likes of, say, Katie O'Connor violin, Niall O'Sullivan on trumpet. We've got Gerald Peregrine on cello, Maria Mason on violin. They're all great.
Sweet.
And then it was actually recorded, it was engineered and recorded in the Ventry recording studio, which is in Dublin, and then mastered, by fabulous Bob Katz. He's amazing.
Well, you're a busy woman. I know that the night after you're playing in the Whale, you've been aboard Gosh Theatre, you've done the National Concert Hall, you've been over in Regent's Park in London. I mean, is this something that you would get nervous about, or is it because you know, you've been doing it quite a while? I don't know if it feels.
Oh no, you're all any performer who says they're not nervous before they go on stage is lying through their teeth. So yeah, of course I'll be nervous, but you know what? You look around here, and I'm sure if for people who haven't been in Whale Theatre, you can really feel its warmth, can't you? You can really feel its warmth. It's just beautiful, and it's a gorgeous space. So I'm actually really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, there's a timeless thing.
The stage is gorgeous.
Yeah, well, I think the whole thing is it gives you a feel like it's a time capsule. This could be anywhere at any time.
Could be anywhere.
Could be New York.
It could be in the
Paris,
1930s. It could be like New York, Paris. It's got the real feel, which I love. It's like an old jazz club in New York, but it's also like something you might see in Hollywood. Even the lights are.
The attention to detail by young Sharon Ryle have been is fantastic. She and of course it was Ross' kind of love of the idea that you'd make something that wasn't just another theatre. It was something that you felt this is special.
I love that Ross is such an advocate of the arts. He's just, and this is such a local enterprise. It's really bringing such fantastic culture to all of Greystones, South Dublin, Wicklow, and there are people travelling from all over, I hear, so it's great. I'm
suspicious that deep down Ross is a performer who's just never been asked up on stage. Maybe if you ask him up, I would think Steppenwolf, Born to be Wild, or maybe in one of the Prodigy songs, Firestarter, something like that would suit him. I know it'd be a step out of the but just something a little bit.
Maybe we should
Motorhead medley, just as a kind of a tribute to Lemmy passing would be good. Well, listen, we look forward to the 15th,
so much,
and and we'll link to your album, we'll link to your website, and people can explore further.
Cool.
Nice.
Thank you.